Just south of California's sun-kissed border, a storm was brewing. It wasn't a natural disaster, but a human one. A storm fueled by greed, drugs, bullets, and blood. This is the story of the Tijuana Cartel, a criminal empire forged in secrecy and savagery. A story shaped by one of the most ruthless families Mexico has ever known, the Arellano Félix siblings. As the 1980s faded into history, Mexico's underworld braced for change. The so-called godfather of drug trafficking, Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, had ruled over a sprawling narcotics empire. But when he was finally arrested in 1989, it didn't end the drug war, it detonated it. The empire he built shattered, splintering into brutal factions. And from the ashes, a new beast arose, one that would paint the border city of Tijuana red. Chapter 1. Crumbling Empires, Rising Wolves. To understand the Tijuana Cartel, we have to rewind to a time when Mexico's drug trade was still a centralized syndicate, run with military precision and patriarchal control. At the top sat Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, known as El Padrino, the Godfather. Gallardo was a former police officer turned narcotics overlord. He had built an empire that stretched from Colombia's cocaine fields to Los Angeles's crack corners. His strategy? Unity. Cooperation among the major drug families under the Guadalajara cartel banner. But unity is a fragile thing. In 1985, DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered by cartel members. His death sent shockwaves through the U.S. and put unprecedented heat on Gallardo. In 1989, Mexican authorities, under pressure from the U.S., finally arrested El Padrino. What followed was chaos. Without the iron grip of Gallardo, the empire splintered. Each faction vied for control of smuggling routes, known as plazas. One of the most coveted was the Tijuana Corridor, a key gateway into California. It was here that a new power emerged, a family whose name would soon become synonymous with fear, the Arellano Félix clan. Chapter 2. The Family Business. The Arellano Félix siblings hailed from Sinaloa, ground zero for many of Mexico's most notorious narcos. There were 11 in total, 7 brothers and 4 sisters. Raised in poverty, the family's climb into wealth and power was anything but conventional. Benjamin, the eldest, was the brains, a cold strategist with a calculating mind. Ramon, his younger brother, was the muscle, a psychotic enforcer feared even among criminals. Eduardo handled finances and logistics. Francisco Javier and Luis Fernando would later play roles in the cartel's evolution. And then there was Enedina, the so-called narcomami, who, years later, would prove that ruthlessness wasn't limited to the men. The siblings capitalized on the chaos following Gallardo's arrest. With familial ties to the Sinaloa cartel and a network of corrupt officials, they quickly took control of Tijuana's drug routes. They weren't just running drugs, they were building an empire. By the early 1990s, the Tijuana Cartel had become a force to be reckoned with. They controlled smuggling operations that transported tons of cocaine, heroin, and marijuana into the U.S., making billions in profit. But they didn't just rely on product. They relied on fear. Chapter 3. Terror by Design. While other cartels embraced discretion, the Tijuana Cartel operated with theatrical violence. They turned brutality into a brand. Ramon Arellano Félix, the cartel's most feared hitman, spearheaded this campaign of terror. He ran an elite team of sicarios, killers trained in military tactics. Public assassinations, torture videos, and mass graves became hallmarks of their rule. In 1998, the Ensenada massacre shocked the nation. 18 people were slaughtered in a nightclub. It wasn't a drug deal gone wrong. It was a message, a show of power. Ramon's signature was unmistakable. Operatives dressed as police, armed with military-grade weapons, carried out executions with chilling precision. Corruption reached deep into the political and law enforcement systems. Border agents were bribed. Judges were threatened. Mayors and governors looked the other way. Tijuana became a narco-state within a state. Chapter 4. Blood in the streets, but with power came enemies. Chief among them, Joaquin El Chapo Guzman and the Sinaloa Cartel. A brutal turf war erupted. Bodies piled up. Families vanished. Police commanders were executed in broad daylight. The Arellano Félix brothers declared war on anyone who challenged their control. Ramon became infamous for personally hunting rival cartel members, often disguising himself in costumes, once even as a priest. U.S. authorities took notice. The FBI and DEA launched full-scale investigations. By the early 2000s, the Arellano Félix brothers were among the most wanted men in the Western Hemisphere. Chapter 5. The Fall. In February 2002, Ramon was killed in a shootout with police in Mazatlan. A week later, Benjamin was captured in Puebla. Eduardo followed in 2008. The Arellano Félix empire was crumbling. The siblings who once ruled with fear were either dead, imprisoned, or in hiding. But the story wasn't over. Chapter 6. The woman who took control. In the void left by her brothers, Enedina Arellano Félix stepped out of the shadows. Unlike her siblings, Enedina wasn't interested in bloodbaths. She was an accountant by training, and under her rule, the Tijuana Cartel pivoted from chaos to cunning. She focused on laundering money, forging alliances, and reducing visibility. Violence dropped, not out of mercy, but strategy. The cartel became quieter, but not weaker. Chapter 7. Civil War from Within. Power vacuums breed betrayal. Enedina's nephew, Luis Fernando Sanchez Arellano, known as El Ingeniero, emerged as a successor, but his leadership was contested. A rogue enforcer, Teodoro Garcia Cimental, broke away, igniting a brutal civil war in Baja California. Shootings erupted in the streets. Severed heads were left in coolers. Mass graves multiplied. Ultimately, both men were captured, but the infighting had weakened the cartel's grip. Chapter 8. Fallen Kings, Rising Phantoms. With the Arellano Félix dynasty fractured, rivals moved in. Chief among them, the Sinaloa Cartel, now at its apex. But the Tijuana Cartel didn't vanish. Instead, it evolved. By 2010, remnants of the cartel had begun forming loose alliances with other groups, sometimes even with former enemies. They struck deals with the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG, seeking to reclaim lost plazas. But loyalty among cartels is fragile. These alliances were often short-lived and punctuated with betrayals. Chapter 9. The Cartel Today. Today, the Tijuana Cartel is a shadow of its former self. But it is not extinct. Under the quiet yet firm leadership of Enedina, the organization persists, leaner, smarter, and quieter. It continues to traffic narcotics, launder money, and extort businesses. And it remains a key player in Baja California's underworld. But the era of the blood-soaked brothers is gone. Chapter 10. Legacy of Blood. The Arellano Félix family didn't just run a cartel. They left scars on a nation. Their reign changed the way cartels operated. They fused family loyalty with militarized violence. They brought narco-terror into the public eye. And they proved that fear could be a weapon more powerful than any gun. Their story is a cautionary tale, not just about crime, but about power. About how empires rise and how they fall. And how, even in their ruins, the echoes of violence never quite fade. In Tijuana, the sun still shines. Tourists still cross the border. But beneath the surface, the shadows remain. This is the legacy of the Arellano Félix family. This is the Tijuana Cartel.